So, hello, welcome everybody to this afternoon's Education and Early Years Best Practice Network. We are recording the session, so please have your camera on and off, whatever works best for you. This is for the large number of people we've been talking to, Gemma and I, who would really like to attend but can't because of other commitments, or like we say, it's half term this week in some areas of the country. So it's being recorded. We have myself here today from NCFA. I'm part of the provider development team. We are here to support teaching and learning of the qualifications. I've also got my colleague Gemma here, who will be supporting education in early years T-levels moving forward. I'm going to hand over to Janet, and then we're going to get going on the session.
Fantastic. Thanks, Helen, and hello to everybody here and those people listening on a recording. So my name's Janet King, Sector Manager for Education and Childcare here at NCFE, and I also love the Best Practice Network because this really is the reflection side of things, looking at how things are going, and just the network between you as professionals is what it's all about, really, and that's what fuels the qualification and brings it alive. So it's wonderful to be part of it. So thank you to Helen and Gemma for having me, and I'm going to pass over to Kate, who I believe, and I know because I've seen it, has got a wonderful PowerPoint and reflection to share with us. Over to you, Kate.
Right, sorry, I was and it just said, but hi, I don't know if I was introduced. I'm Kate. Janet and Helen asked me to come along to this meeting today to share, squeaky desk as well, share my experiences of the ESP so far. So, if we go to the next slide then, please, Helen. What actually qualifies me to do this? 4 years ago, I was in the same position as a lot of you guys. I was just an ordinary teacher in an ordinary FE college, pootling along with the level 3 diploma quite nicely. Now I'm a T-level teacher. Then I knew nothing about T-levels. Now I'm a T-level teacher and I know a bit more about T-levels. So I'm sharing my 3 years of experience with you to hopefully help you guys out, because I was exactly where you are 3 years ago. Moving on. Right, so we are a phase 2 provider. So we were the second lot. Had one whole cohort go through. We've now got a first year and a second year. If we move on. So when I was told that I was in charge of implementing the T-level, I read through the spec, had a little weep, I have to confess, read through it again and thought, actually, even though it's a new qualification, there's an awful lot of it that's very similar. So the content is pretty similar. The placement expectations are pretty similar. And when I say similar, I mean to the level 3 diploma that we were running. However, there were some differences. The words are different. So rather than having units, we have elements. Rather than doing 0 to 8, we do 0 to 19. And the biggest difference of all, as you guys are probably aware now, is how the qualification is assessed, the assessments. So if we move on, Helen, I looked at the assessments and 2 core exams. Okay, fine. We all know what an exam is. We all know how they run. We all know the expectations. Not everyone's a great fan of exams. And it is a barrier to overcome when we're recruiting, but it's common ground. We know what they are. We understand them. We can do these. So that was fine. Moving on, Helen. And then it came to the employer set project. First of all, employer set project, nothing at all to do with industrial placements, nothing to do with the students' employers on their industrial statements, which was my first conception. I thought, how is every employer, how is every student out in their different places going to do the same project? Nothing to do with that at all. It's an extended project that is set by NCFE in consultation. So when they set it, they consult with employers to get the question, the case study. Okay, so that was the first misconception I had, nothing to do with their placements. Second one, well, not in fact, it's multiple tasks. It's not straightforward. It has lots of different segments. So it's difficult to get your head around, and it can be a challenge to administer. Yeah, and that's a fact. So, okay, right. So we've got to do this. I am a visual learner. So when I read the spec, it didn't really sink in just reading words. So I spent a lot of time doing mind maps and flow charts, thinking, right, we've got to do this and then do this and then do this, and this connects with this and this connects with this. And I spent a long time doing that. And at that point, I was cursing NCFE to the nth degree. Why they can't count from 1 to 9 for the different tasks, I will never know. We have task 1, we have task 2, 2A, 2A part 1, all of that sort of stuff. Once you get your head around the numbering and the naming of it, it does make life a little bit easier. But wow, does that take some doing? And it's still as a bugbear to me now, but that was what we have to live with. Right, so I was beginning to get my head around it a little bit, and then moving on, Helen, my line manager said to me, okay, I want you to lead a session about the assessments in the T-levels to all the other staff in the team. Now, at this point, and still now, to be fair, most of the other people in my team have nothing to do with T-levels. So it was a challenge for me to explain the ESP to them when actually they've got no investment in it at all. They didn't really need to understand it. But that process of explaining it to a group of people that had no knowledge or no sort of investment in it actually really did begin to clarify it for me. It's that old adage, isn't it? Teach something is the best way of learning something. So that was that's how it started to clarify for me. And then it was like, okay, we've got this thing, we've got the flow of it, we've got all the tasks. How are we going to introduce it to students? Now, I'm going to do a little bit of a backstory here. When we first introduced the T-level in education, we were planning on having it running alongside the level 3 diploma. So we had a group of students who we enrolled onto the T-level and a group of students who enrolled onto the diploma. As it happened, neither of those groups were viable. So what we had to do was amalgamate them into one group, and we pulled the level 3 diploma and we just had the T-level. This was we had to do a big marketing campaign for the people that came to college to do the diploma. So what I didn't want to do in the September, when they were new and fresh and not really wanting to do the course, was to bamboozle them with the ins and outs of the T-level, the ESP. So what we did was within the teaching of the elements, we introduced and incorporated all the skills that they would need to be successful in the T-level. So within our everyday teaching, they had research tasks to do. They were they started giving each other peer feedback. From day one, we had them standing up, presenting to each other. So, and being recorded, which they hate, but c'est la vie. So we didn't actually introduce the ESP as a thing, but we introduced all the skills that they would need to be able to be successful in the ESP. Right, and then what we then did after Christmas, if we move on, we had practice sessions. So every week we had a 2-hour ESP lesson, so to speak. The first one we went through all the bits of the ESP, what it was, how it all fitted together, all the things that needed to be done, all the tasks. And then each week, together as a whole group, we walked through each one of the tasks. And then they did some work in groups or pairs for each of the tasks. So, for example, in the first week, we looked at a brief. We used and what sort of information would we need to be able to do this brief? We can research that, we can write it down. And then they spent time with a partner or with a couple of people doing that research and creating those notes that they could use for the rest of the task. We did this and we walked through it, and that took about 8 weeks because of all the different tasks. Alongside that, what we used was a second brief, where if the learners wanted to do it in their own time outside of the lessons, they could work through it as well. So we had the big one in the classroom, and then some people did a second one, but that was up to them. We didn't formally mark this practice one. As I say, it took place over 8 weeks. We gave lots of feedback as we were doing it, and we were talking through everything. So that wasn't formally marked, and they didn't have any formal feedback. But as I say, it was an ongoing project. And that's where we're at the moment. And then what we will do, what's coming up after just the 2 weeks before Easter, we're carrying out a full ESP mock. So this will be done as per the actual ESP. We've got no other lessons for 2 weeks. They are still going into placement, but no other lessons. And we are doing a full mock, which will be properly marked, and feedback will be given to the students. And then, so by the time the actual one comes round, they are almost desensitized to the tasks and to the process. They'll be used to it, they'll be used to the format, used to the skills, and they're very well practiced at the skills that are needed to do it. Thank you. Right, so I asked our current second years what their views and what their memories were of the ESP, and I've got a few of them shared here for you now. Our ESP results are always surprisingly good. Not surprisingly good, that's an awful thing to say, are better than the exam results, the exams. So the students themselves said they were shocked at how high they got. Practice, practice, practice was their advice. And it's certainly good for those that are less good at exams, okay? Because it's not like preparing for an exam. It's not like you've got to revise, retain all that information and then regurgitate it as per the question. The students know the sorts of things that they're going to have in. The only unknown is the actual sort of case study. They really liked how they could change their initial plan. They thought that was really good. So actually, if they had a week activity plan initially, they had the opportunity to change it, and they felt that was really empowering for them. They thought it brought everything together. Actually, all the core elements come together. They did say it was scary, particularly the presentation part. They said it actually helped in their confidence in the industrial placement. They liked the structure. And this bottom one I thought was really insightful. They said it was like a jigsaw puzzle. So they see all the different pieces, and each of the different pieces, they begin to see the picture on it. And then actually it all comes together. And by the time they get to do the ESP, they can see the whole picture, and it all brings it together. I was going to say something else, but I forgot what it was. Never mind, it will come to me. Right, so my top tips would be work on the skills needed before you introduce the assignment. I really think that's important, because if you do it at the same time, it can become overwhelming. So just make the skills part of everyday life. Take time to understand the process yourself. I think that's important as well. So really get your head around it. It takes a lot of work to actually get your head around it. But as I say, it's like that jigsaw. Once you start putting the pieces together, the big picture comes up. Ask for help. Okay. The NCFE help chat thing that you find on the portal, they come back to you really quickly. If you've got any questions, just ask. Desensitize your students by practicing together. That was really powerful. So it's not scary, it's not sitting on your own to do it. Do it together first to desensitize them. Work closely with other teams in the college. I think this is really important. And I mean, I don't know what other structures of other colleges are like, but we're really lucky where we have got an IT team, digital team, exams team, and it does take a collaborative effort to get these ESP done. You know, you need the IT to have secure drives to save all their work. You need the digital to get the recordings done, and you need exams just to get your head around everything that has to be submitted and file names and all of that sort of stuff. So it is a collaborative effort, in my opinion. The tutor guidance is there. Sometimes on the first read through, it's a bit baffling, but just read it again, read it again. It will become clear. And then I think the uploading of all the files at the end can be quite a long task. So I find spending time every evening just making sure everything's in place, all the files that the students have saved have been named correctly, and just they're all in the right place and everything that needs printing is printed. It saves time. It makes the morning a smoother start, in my opinion. And then allowed up to uploading. Everyone has to upload this stuff round about the same time, and things can get busy and it can take a long time. So just leave time to do that. And I've just remembered what I was going to say. When we are doing the peer discussions, when we did the first mock in that first year, we had one group at a time in the room. They did theirs, they went out. Another group came in, they did theirs, they went out. But it was quite a difficult conversation. They felt quite self-conscious. So now we have all the groups in one room at the same time, and the sort of babble of noise with each group talking does actually make it easier for the students because they're not as self-conscious of hearing their own voice. That's what I was going to say earlier, but I forgot. So in my opinion, I actually do think it's a really, really effective assessment. It mimics and mirrors the sorts of conversations and the sorts of processes that happen in settings. So even though it can be a challenge, it can be a nightmare to administer, to understand, I think it's worth the effort because it is such a good assessment, in my opinion. And I've not been paid by Janet or Helen to say that. I truly do believe that. The skills that it develops are those skills that are lacking in the current workforce and current 16 to 19-year-olds, so that they're developing those skills. And I'm sure you will be surprised at how well your students do, because it is more akin to how our students work rather than doing an exam. So I've waffled a lot for 20 minutes. Has anyone got any questions or anything? So hot.
Katie, Katie, you're wonderful. I've stopped sharing my screen. I'm just going to check the chat to see if we've got anything. Do you have a timetable that you would have that for the 3-week window? Has a question come in from Haley? How do you what kind of timetable did you use for the ESP, Kate?
What, for the actual thing?
Yeah.
Right, let me see if I can find it. Can I share my screen?
You should be able to, yes.
Right, hang on.
I mean, I do talk, while you're looking, I'll have a quick chat with Janet about the timetable. Janet, we do get asked this, don't we, about how we should, how do we recommend it set up? And I said it kind of depends on your resources, your student group sizes, and your actual students, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely does, yeah.
Right, let me see if I can. Only meeting organisers and presenters can share it. Can I email it over to you, Helen?
Absolutely, and then I can share it, yes. Janet, what would you say about an ESP scheme of work or timetable?
Yeah, you've got to make something work. I think you've got to really know when your students work best, because you want to maximise the those opportunities when students are, I don't know, more alert, or when students find it easier to work, when you're going to have those scheduled breaks, things like that. Doing it, how long you spend on that in a session. So I don't know, Kate, you could talk us through maybe how you split those hours up, if you wanted to. That might be useful.
Yeah. I've just sent it over to Helen. I mean, it's a working document. It's our draft. I don't think there's anything confidential on there. So if you can share that, Helen.
Just waiting for the internet to whiz it through. There we go.
I think the problems will, as we develop, will when I say problems, I'm just thinking you mentioned it with the group sizes and one group in, one group out, and then having people. As those cohorts grow, that is something, isn't it, that will become more of a logistic factor, I suppose.
Yeah. But as I say, it's so much better with them all in the room at the same time. They just feel more comfortable.
Maybe.
It's more, and also it's what they're used to, isn't it? They're used to doing group work. They're used to having that babble in the background. Yeah. So here's our proposed timetable. So as you see, we only do Monday to Wednesday because our students are in placement Thursday and Friday, and they're continuing with that throughout the whole of the assessment window. So we've got the pre-release, which I call Task Zero. Obviously, that's on the 22nd of March. And then, you know, it is quite a tight turnaround. We have tried to avoid doing two big things, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So the first task 1A, we got that on the Monday morning, and then task 1B, we got on the Tuesday morning. Now, we could have timetabled it Monday morning, Monday afternoon, but I think that's a lot for the students to concentrate for, and we've got the capacity to be able to split that up a little bit.
I think that's a good idea, Kate, because then they've got the time to think about what they've done in task 1A before moving on to task 1B, you know, an overnighter
absolutely.
time. And if the morning people obviously do it in the morning, but if in the afternoon people do it in the afternoon, depends, doesn't
it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and in the reality of life, especially as more of these, it will be limited by room availability. But at the moment, I tend to get organised quite early, so get rooms booked before anyone else.
That's another top tip then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Get the rooms booked nice and quick.
Especially as more T-levels come on board and there's more people doing this sort of stuff. And then you can see on the Wednesday, we have got morning and afternoon, but that in the morning they're preparing for the discussion, and in the afternoon they're doing the discussion. Now we put those on the same day so that it's all fresh in their memory still, because they need
good idea.
They don't have to then go away, have another think about it for the and if we didn't, that would be like a whole week almost. And then on the Tuesday, the following, we've got Bank Holiday Monday in the middle of it, which isn't helpful. And then on the Tuesday, again, we are doubling up there, but they're shorter sessions. So we've got that hour where they are reflecting on their peer discussion and amending their activity plan. And then on the Tuesday, in the afternoon, they're preparing for the discussion, the presentation discussion. And then on the following Monday, don't know why we didn't do the Wednesday, there must have been a reason. On the following Monday, all day, two of us are doing the presentations. So they'll all have slots where they just come in for those slots. And then finally on the Tuesday, they do their reflections.
And how many students have you got, Kate, that you're doing this with?
We've just got 18. Now, I know people have much bigger cohorts, but we've just got the 18. Although its numbers are looking massive for next year.
And so, I've got a few questions that I'll just run through if that's all right.
Yeah.
How did you change anything doing it in the second year than you did in the first year? Was there any major changes you made?
The biggest change was the group discussion, moving it from just one at a time to everyone together. Did we have any other changes? I don't think so.
I guess you would have learned from doing all the mock and all the preparatory activities, what to do and what not to do. Did the students or you as the teachers find any of the tasks more challenging than the others?
They do, and this surprised me actually, but they do like the discussion and with each other and the peer feedback, which when we started doing that in September, they were very hesitant because giving and receiving that peer feedback is hard. It's hard. The other thing that they found really useful was to see where the marks are allocated, because actually there's no marks allocated for that peer feedback. So I think that takes the pressure off them a little bit. But what
Nice.
we do emphasize is you're actually helping your mate, because if you just say this activity plan is brilliant, then their peers have got nothing to work on for task 2B.
Yeah.
So the more feedback they get, the more they're helping each other.
Yeah.
And that worked well, actually, so they can see that. I think it's 9 marks. Oh, I'm so sad. I think it's 9 marks that they get for the amended activity plan. So
Yeah.
they're actually helping their mates get those 9 marks by doing that activity well. And they said they enjoyed that, which surprised me.
I'm really interested in you saying that they're helping the mates. When you put the groups together for those peer group discussions, did you put groups of friends together? Or did you split them up? How did you put
Yeah,
them together?
that's a challenge. What we have, what I've done now where they're practicing, I've asked them each to name one person they'd like to work with.
Right.
And from that, I have put them in groups. But I've also caveated that with saying, if you don't work well, then I'll split the groups up again. So essentially, they're friendship groups.
Yeah.
I have engineered it a bit to make sure that we haven't got a particularly weak group altogether,
Right.
or a particularly strong group
Strong.
altogether.
Yes. Yes.
There is the added complication of extra time, but there's no time limits on those peer discussion sessions. So in effect, that doesn't really matter too much.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to ask about the reflection task. So task 4, did you
Yeah.
provide a template reflective model, or did you let them choose a reflective model to use for the reflection task, or did they just write freely about how the project had
they
gone?
they just wrote freely. Now, I think with the health one, there is a template.
I
If
mean, you
it's not
can
with this
use,
one, then it is. If it's
yeah,
not in this one, and then it's with the health one.
I think it is the healthcare, because there's not one for
Yeah.
education. It was just a case of how did you manage the
Yeah.
reflection?
So I was just trying to work out what I did. So
Yeah.
because I'd seen the health one and it just had the different tasks basically.
Oh, right. Yes.
We kind of encouraged them to
Adapted
do
that.
that.
Oh.
So, reflect on task 1. I've said to use a loose reflective model, because
Mhm.
if I told them to use Gibbs, then they'd do 4 pages for each task.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
so, the general idea of reflection, what you did, good points, bad bits, what you do next time. Repeat that for tasks 1
Yeah.
through
I was
3.
just interested because when I was reading the chief examiner's report from last summer, they said that sometimes students just basically relisted what they'd done, and not all of them had actually reflected on, so what did you learn from that? And then what can you
Yeah.
use from that in the future? What's your future learning goals? We've also had a provider say they were thinking about doing a reflective journal for the students to complete as they're going through the ESP, to make some notes about
Okay.
after each task and what they've learned, so they've got something to use at the end. I thought that might be an interesting tip. Do you think that might be good for some of
Yeah, I mean,
them?
they wouldn't be able to take that in with them, obviously, would they? But they'd have that memory of writing it. Yeah, it
Yes.
might work. Yeah.
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 Wonderful. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if we've got any more questions. Janet, anything you wanted to ask, or Gemma?
Well, the
There is a
first thing I
question.
want to. Sorry, no, go on, Kate. It's fine.
No, I was just saying there was a question there saying, do you have examples of peer feedback sheets?
Oh,
I
yeah.
haven't got any worked examples because it's something that they righty rather than typey. But obviously there is a pro forma that is provided that has to be used. Sorry.
I was just going to say thank you, because
Right.
I think when you first look, and I'm going to be very open and honest here, because when I first look, and Helen knows, I read it and I read it, ESP I'm talking about, and I read it, and I was exactly like you. Why do we have part 1, part 2, that goes 1A, 1B, but we're in part 2. You know, weird correlations to me for the numbers. So, you know, I just want you to know that we fully appreciate that, and we feed those sorts of things back. But getting over that and thinking about what it actually is, I had to read it a few times, I'll be honest, and then Helen came up with her magic slide, which I absolutely love. And if you haven't seen it, you just need to say, "Can you send me the magic slide?" And she will. But the actual things, I fully agree with what you said. You know, the actual nitty-gritty, what's going on here? What do the students actually have to do when they're thinking about planning, when they're thinking about discussing it, when they're thinking about reflecting on it, and when they're thinking about justifying it in the end, and then doing that big reflection? I think that's what happens quite incidentally in placement, isn't it? And I think that's the bread and butter in a way. Oh, there we go. Can we have the magic slide? Yes, come on. And when you look at that, I think actually, yes, those students who are doing that or seeing that or engaging with that in their placements can just jump on board with this and really make something of it. And it helps then, you know, holistically for those things to go together for the end of the first year and that aggregation of outcome. So yeah, and I always reflected when it first came out on myself as well. And I think as a younger student, I would have found the exams easier because I'd have understood exactly what you said, Kay. You know what it looks and feels like. You might not like it, but you know what you're going to get. And and you can prepare for that. When it comes to an ESP, it's a little bit alien, it's a little bit unknown, it's a little bit innovative, it's a little bit new. And especially when you put them all together into one assessment. But it does actually make sense. And I think as a younger student, I would have found all of those different components a little bit scary. So the practice of having discussions, giving feedback, being recorded, being videoed, whatever has to happen, I would have found that peer to peer at 16 really difficult. So I think the more you can practice that would have been my, you know, I'd be right behind that as a hint and a tip. Yeah. But well done for today. It's brilliant.
No, and conversely, what I actually think as well from your first point is that the students fit in more at placement when they've gone through this process, so that they can join in with it.
Yeah.
As well as, you know, realizing the worth of it, they can actually then contribute once they've been through it.
Yeah, it's that day-to-day bread and butter, isn't it? You're looking at individual children or groups of children, and you're thinking, how can I make, basically, bottom line, how can I make things better? And I think that's what the ESP is trying to do. So, yeah, good.
I'm going to share my screen because I'm going to put the magic slide up for everybody who's here, but I will also send it. Gemma, have you got anything that's jumping into your head? I love your new objective view of things. So just wondering if there's anything you wanted to ask Kate.
I think first of all, thank you very much, Kate, because as a new member of the provider development team, I have my education head on because that's my background, but I'm just learning how to place that T-level hat. And between Janet and Helen's magic slide, obviously, and your wonderful bringing to life of how you've managed this as a process for you, your colleagues and your students has really brought it to life for me. I can see now how this is being delivered in practice and how it's being delivered really well. I think the idea of pulling together all these threads of learning into a new format, which the ESP, like Janet's just said, it's a new, innovative, different way of delivering content that you all know so well. I've read the ESP stuff as well, and I'm currently reading it again. But having the input from yourself and the magic slide, which is coming, it's coming, is you know, it's amazing for me to see. And the tips that you've given today are absolutely brilliant. And I will be passing those on and sharing those far and wide. Because they all sound absolutely fantastic, and it sounds like all of your students now are getting the opportunity to be really engaged in this and look at how they can use these skills in more than one context. That's those transversal skills that can be used not just in industry placement, but can be used in all sorts of other areas of their lives as well. That confidence building, that, you know, sharing information, that building on each other's skills, that supportive environment. I think it's fantastic. So thank you so much. You've welcomed me to the world of ESP. Thank you.
So this is the new and updated slide. I mean, Kate, you probably saw this a few years ago when I first started supporting it, because I read the ESP and employer set project. All right, so that happens in placement. No, it doesn't. Definitely not. How the industry specialist, then yeah, it happens in class. So yeah, they do their research. From that, so they'll get the research. They'll get a few sentences about a child or young person, and they'll have to do some research on it. Encourage the students to think about all 12 elements, as Kate said. It brings all 12 of the core elements together. So when they're carrying out the research, they really need to think about what paths it might go down, because Kate, I would imagine when you see the pre-release, you'll go, oh, I think I know where this is going. You can read between the lines, use your experience and knowledge of the sector and go, oh, I would check X, Y, and Z. So did you find, I'm going to bring your real life experience into my this magic slide. Did you find that you did a lot of input or guidance or feedback when they were doing the research and showing you the research notes for some feedback?
More in the practice and the mock than the actual thing. But in the actual thing, we give them the opportunity, and this is where students are typical students, we give them the opportunity to submit and to bring them in and talk to us before that deadline. Now, there's always going to be those that do and most that don't. So at that point, it is up to them. But yeah, we do input if we get the opportunity to, but it's not something I push because they've had all that experience.
So you do a lot of that when they're doing the mocks and they're practicing. That's really good to know. Yeah, so they've got those skills, so they don't need to come to you when it's live. They're confident enough to do it themselves. It'd be nice if more did. Yeah. Okay, so task, when it goes live, you get the rest of the information about that child or young person. You get the project brief. And they're off and running and they're creating either their early support or intervention plan, depending on which themed OS they're doing. They create that early support intervention plan for 1A, and then they create their activity plan for 1B. Anything in particular leaps out to you in relation to task 1?
The interpreting the tracking sheet can be a challenge because obviously we don't know what format that's going to take. And some are more straightforward than others. So it is really good practice to look at a lot of different types of tracking sheets. And also in 1A and 1B, you get maths competency and digital competency, don't you? So that's a big question I always ask is how can I get maths into this? And I just say it's interpreting that tracking sheet and actually showing that you've interpreted that correctly by what you put into the support plan. Brilliant. And the digital is just type it in a box.
Yes, absolutely. And the Chief Examiner report supports what you've just said there, that they brought in maths and digital for that. So excellent, thank you. So we'll just run through task A, they prepare for that peer discussion, they submit their review. So at that point, Kate, you are giving all the students in a peer group the copies of each other's plans to have a look at and review. They can make some notes and they plan questions. Now, one thing I talk about in preparing students for this is I'll say, make sure that if you've got a group of 4 students on planning to ask the same question, you've already alluded to or explained how to ensure that they get the most out of that by preparing them in the preparing tasks and practice tasks to actually ask each other really good questions and help each other in that.
And tutors can input in that part as well.
Yes, so that review and get it amended, etc. Really good. Take part in the discussion and reflect on the discussion. And I also recommend to staff that they might make notes during the peer discussion in case the students don't capture or don't remember what they're asked about or what they're talking about. Is that something you do or not?
Sorry, just run that past me again. I didn't quite understand.
So while the students are carrying out the peer group discussion,
Yeah.
it's supervised, or it's
Yeah.
they are doing it with each other. Do you make any notes so that you know what different people have said to each other or asked each other to help them with the reflection afterwards?
I don't know. They're because obviously they've got their own sheet to fill in at that point.
Yeah, so
So
they
the
tend to
person
capture it though.
Yeah,
Capture it themselves. Okay.
the person receiving that feedback has a form themselves to fill in.
Yeah.
So no, we don't do that, and that would be quite tricky when we've got 4 or 5 groups in one room going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you there. So task 3, I call this the kind of role play. It's a bit more like you take on the persona, don't you, of a manager or a supervisor or a team leader, and it's a bit more of a, yes, I'll present my plan to you now as my tutor, manager, team leader, but then have a proper discussion. And you have some questions, don't you, that you have guided questions to ask during that. Any top tips about that bit?
Well, sometimes the questions can be a bit generic, and obviously we can reword it so that they understand but not lead, so that's quite challenging sometimes. So it especially for the weaker students, when you ask a question that they haven't really covered or considered very much, that can be quite tricky.
Yes, so it might be introducing something new at this point, which can be tricky, because you're not allowed to share those questions in advance of this task. You can only do it when it's live. And another question: do your students create anything to present to the peer group or to present to you? Do they do a PowerPoint? Do they do a poster? Do they? No. What do they tend to do?
Ours do a PowerPoint.
Right, and does that help them?
Yeah, definitely, because again, there's digital marks that are to be gained. So they've got to do something digitally. So yeah, they do a PowerPoint. It's like an aid memoir. And something that they can hold on to, really.
Yeah, and I know the chief examiner report as well said that it shows evidence of proper planning to present. Do they tend to stand and present it to their peers, or stand and present it to you, or just sit and chat about it, sort of thing?
They just do it to a tutor. Last year it was much more informal. It was sort of a sit down job. But this year it's videoed, which I think is a slightly different situation.
New,
so because I don't know whether part of the mark will be on their presenting skills and how they present, in which case they will be standing up in front of a board presenting, which is coming away a little bit from reality, because it would be sat down around a table. But we've got to play the game, haven't we?
So. And I do know that in the chief examiner's report, we're going to go back to, the examiners were able to give more marks when the presentations were video recorded and not just audio recorded, because there were points on the slides, for example, that weren't necessarily talked about, but it it showed that they knew additional bits that were relevant.
And going back to the health ESP that I was heavily involved in last November before last, the students didn't gain marks. I won't say lost marks. They didn't gain marks if the recording was poor, because they weren't able to see those skills that you just said. So it is worth talking to your digital guys and your IT guys to make sure that the way that you record them is optimum.
Yeah. However, be careful not to use Ultra HD, because it makes the files too big to go. Makes it it makes the files too big to upload. Yes. So I know one of the tips that we're giving everybody at the moment, all providers, is please don't record it in Ultra HD. It makes the file too big to be uploaded to the portal. But you're right. You want to provide the best possible recording for your students, because you know that summative assessment mark is a portion to this. So yeah, and then we've talked a bit already, haven't we, about the reflection task. Make sure it's not just a list of what happened, and it's really important to get the analysis in there and to really pull apart those higher order thinking skills. Yeah, that is the magic slide. I'm going to stop sharing the screen again, and just see if anybody has any other questions on anything we've said. Is anything else in the chat?
There's a question about what information they can take into task 4. Now I'll let you guys answer that in case I get it wrong.
I'm going to hand to Janet for that one.
I would say yes, because as long as they're not bringing anything new in, you're okay. Yeah. They can't bring once that clock starts ticking, and you start that first piece of the assignment for 1A, then your clock is ticking, and no new information must be brought in. So, and if they're reflecting, then they really ought to be able to reflect on what they've done. So I guess it's a case of making sure that they can access that in a safe way. And if you've been, I think that the temptation is a task is finished, a task can be uploaded. I just think you need to be careful in case that is going to be useful later on, you know. So Kate, do you wait until the whole thing is finished and then portal it, so to speak?
Definitely, yeah. So all of our students have their own individual exam drives. So the templates are put on there one at a time, as and when they need it. And then this is one of the evening jobs, is they also then have an exam backup drive that the student can't access. So we make sure that everything they need for the next day is on their accessible exam drive. And then everything that isn't is put on their backup, and then by the end of it, everything that's on their backup is then uploaded together. Yeah, I couldn't contemplate uploading them one at a time.
Brilliant. And the other thing is to make sure that every individual student's work is assigned to them. It's saved, you know, with which task it is, with who they are, their ID number, ideally as well, if you can. But just to make sure that
there's a file name structure that they've given on each task.
Make sure you follow that. That then is the top tip for there. Yeah. I've popped the evaluation form link into the chat, so just a plea for everyone to fill the evaluation form in, but also a quick chat about what Kate, for yourself especially, what would you like the focus of our next Best Practice Network meeting to be?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking you because you are the focus of ours, this one. So in repayment, I want to know what you would like us to do for the next month's meeting.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have to tell me now unless you have something that pops into your head, and everybody who's here can can tell us. But yeah, these meetings are driven by yourselves, not by us. We don't choose what we're going to talk about. You guys do. So if you have any ideas, especially you, Kate, as repayment for doing this for us, what would you like the focus of our next meeting to be? Discuss.
I'll get back to you.
Fabulous. Any ideas from anybody that we could consider? And that includes Janet and Gemma.
Only silence.
I was going to say thinking about placements, but we've got the assessor network. Sorry, the dog has now picked up a squeaky toy. Joining in, always joins in.
Haley. Haley's popped something in the chat.
Oh yeah.
That would be the assessors, isn't it?
Yeah, it comes up in the assessors, but we could talk about that, and we could talk about the new EYE criteria that will only be relevant for the new starts in September, but it's all part and parcel of the same vein of thinking, I guess. But structured observations is a good one, isn't it?
It's a really good one.
Yeah, talk about people's experiences on that. Kate?
Also, it would be quite good to get how other people do their assessment 3 for the early years, year 2, where they students actually have to do those observations.
That's
because
3 observations.
yeah, that's something that is quite challenging. I totally understand why we have to teach the students how to do all the observations, but when they go into practice and say, oh, I've got to practice doing a this, that, on the other, they don't always get the support needed, because those kind of observations aren't carried out in placement anymore. So it would be good to sort of unpick that a little bit.
Yeah, that'd be good, and it'd be a good discussion point as well, wouldn't it? So yeah, it's those skills and techniques of observing that you need to be skilled at before you can take the shortcut. So it's a difficult thing, but I do get that they're not seeing that in their everyday practice, those longer observations. So it's difficult. Yeah, be a good discussion. Yeah. Oh, sorry, squeaky toy. I'm going on mute.
That's okay. Kate, is there anything? So when you first read the ESP and first panicked about it and first went, what is this?
Yeah.
To where you are now, what would you have told yourself back in when you'd first read it? What would you say to yourself now if you go back in time?
That a calm, logical approach is what is needed. Look at it bit by bit, not as the whole group. Work out the picture on each of the different jigsaw puzzles before you try and put it all together.
Yeah. Sort out your straight bits, sort out your curved bits.
Definitely.
Nice and calmly, put them in different bags.
Yeah.
Put them in packets for each day, and and what about panic levels? Would you say anything to yourself about your panic levels as a facilitator of it, but the students' panic levels as well? What would you?
I think I managed to prevent the students from panicking. I mean, I was like the proverbial swan, you know.
I was going to say you were a swan.
Yeah. So on the surface, it's all fine. It's all good. We'll do this, that, and the other. And also in the first year, I think all the templates that we used didn't work properly either. So there was those sort of on the spot issues that it just gets resolved, doesn't it? You know, everyone's in the same boat. If there is a big problem, it will be sorted out and concessions will be made if necessary. So I think I protected the students from panic because
you didn't show the
as
panic.
I say, and in that first year we had students that didn't want to do the course and had every intention of creating a fuss whenever they could, so I had to sort of prevent that from happening. So just keep calm, run with it, and it does get easier. I promise you it gets easier. And then they throw small spanners in the works, like, oh, it's going to be video recorded this year, but you know, we we get over them.
Of course, you're professionals. Kate, we cannot thank you enough for doing this. It's absolutely wonderful. Thank you to everybody who came today. Thank you to everybody who's watching it, who's stayed with us to watch it. So, yes, Kate, you're an absolute superstar. We will
thank you.
We will be sharing this with everybody, won't we, Gemma?
You'll be famous far and wide, Kate. Thank you so much.
That's okay, no problem. I'd say any time, but you know.
Don't say that.
No, I don't.
We'll take you up on it.
We'll take you up on it, definitely.
No okay, problem. I'm going to stop recording now. Thank you.